Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for taking the time to attend this webinar. This is the first in a series of 3 webinars designed to provide practical information for all stages of retirement. Today's webinar will discuss information regarding surgical practice considerations for the transition to retirement, as well as resources and a checklist for personal financial planning and health insurance. Our second webinar, which is in July, will give pertinent practical details regarding items such as hospital privileges, your state licensure, and board certification. And Jessica Schrader, Chief of Staff of the American Board of Surgery, will join us for this discussion. The third webinar in August will focus on mental and emotional wellness during and after retirement. And Dr. Lauren Berman, Chair of the Wellness Committee, and Naomi Scott, a Master Certified Life Coach, will provide this discussion. There's no conflict of interest for any of the participants today. Retirement for a surgeon may be a difficult process in more ways than one, and hopefully this series of webinars will help all of us plan for and succeed in retirement. There are so many aspects to a successful retirement, and these may include the transition of one's surgical practice, financial and health preparedness, credentialing and practical details, and most importantly, our mental wellness and emotional health. I'm recently retired, and even though I planned ahead for about 2 to 3 years and my retirement was voluntary, I still struggled with both the practical part of retiring from a surgical career, as well as the emotional transition from being a surgeon to someone that now has a very different life outside of the hospital. The first objective today will be discussed by Dr. Marcin McVeigh, who will address the value of senior surgeons, the difficulties experienced during the transition to retirement, as well as possible solutions. And some of this was presented at the APSA meeting, but I think there's more to present now with more focus on certain topics. We will also present a checklist of items that can and should be considered when preparing for retirement for both financial planning and healthcare. And at the end of this presentation, there will be a QR code for this checklist. Also, we'll send out an evaluation email after the presentation, and that also has the QR code. In addition to the checklist, the QR code will take you to the links and the resources and some websites that we mentioned today in the presentation. And we're really happy to answer any questions. We've left time for that at the end. I think it best if you just put your questions in the chat, and Jennifer's going to monitor that for us, and then we'll address them all at the end of the presentation. So hopefully all of us will someday voluntarily retire. And I recently read a great analogy by the author Roseanne Leipzig of Honest Aging, that there are 3 ways people face aging. And here I would like to put in the word retirement. So there's 3 ways we can face retirement. One is as an ostrich, where you stick your head in the sand and you avoid thinking about it or deny it's going to happen. One is like a worrywart, where I probably fit in, is that you spend a lot of time worrying about it and ruminating about it, but you're not really sure what you're going to do. And finally, like a wise old owl, where we become knowledgeable and we adapt to the process. So my hope is that these series of webinars will help us become wiser and more adaptable in the process of retiring. Surgeons are known to be reluctant to discuss or even think about retirement. Why is that? Perhaps it's because our career has provided us with so much that it is difficult to imagine a life without it. We get intellectual stimulation, financial security, social prestige, self-esteem, sense of accomplishment, and purpose. Is it any wonder that we would want to consider anything else in our life? And we surgeons don't like change. And the idea of retirement is a huge change in our identity and our personal life. In addition, it may bring fear of the fact that retiring means we're aging and getting older, and we might get sick, and we will, of course, eventually die. And I think as pediatric surgeons that we are hyper aware of illness and death, because we see that in our career, and we somehow hope that we will not be affected like those around us. But I do think that talking about this difficult subject will help us all become successful in retirement so that we can enjoy the years that we have left to us. In my search of knowledge, specifically for a retiring surgeon, I found a few pertinent articles and resources, but I really was surprised at the lack of information that was readily available. I do think this is changing in the last couple of years because of increased awareness of the importance of this transition. And I would like to highlight a couple of resources that I found useful. One is our article in, I wouldn't say our pediatric surgery article in Journal of Pediatric Surgery 2024, The Aging Surgeon, Planning for Retirement Across All Stages of One's Surgical Career. The article presents invaluable ideas and topics regarding planning for retirement and even includes suggestion for early career surgeons, mid-career surgeons, and then of course retiring surgeons. And I think it's great to even start thinking about retirement as early career, because that means you're choosing a job that you hope will last your career. You're having ideas of what it is you want to accomplish in your career, so that when you do retire, you can look back and say, yes, I did everything that I had wanted to do and I had hoped to do. I also recommend Dr. Mary Brandt's presentation on ageism, and we've included the link to her presentation in case you didn't hear it in 2022. And she's given us permission for you all to go in there and look at her presentation. The American College of Surgeons published a statement in 2024 on sustaining the lifelong competency of surgeons, and that's worthwhile reading as well. And there is a newly developed Senior Fellow Society in the American College of Surgeons, and they are producing several webinars of different topics. There was quite a good webinar in February entitled Successful Retirement Planning, and this included a financial advisor giving good financial advice, and the ACS Medicare advisor giving information regarding Medicare. And again, we've included that link so that it's if something you're interested in, that's what it contains, and it's worth a while watching. So after reviewing all of these, what I found for the elements for a successful retirement are career financial planning. I think that's a given. But what is amazing is that, and I don't think a lot of us are aware of, is that you can start on this when you begin your career, as well as the awareness of your career trajectory so that you are satisfied and fulfilled when you retire. It's important to develop interests and goals in your limited free time so that you have those to pursue and to look forward post-surgery. And it's even more important to maintain your physical health so that you have the energy and strength to enjoy your interests and goals. Transition planning within the surgical practice and institution. Dr. McVeigh is going to discuss this in just a minute. Knowledge of pertinent credentialing details. We'll talk about this in our second webinar. And mental wellness and resiliency, which will be covered in our third webinar. So now I'd like to turn this over to Dr. McVeigh, who's the chair of our practice committee, and she's going to go over the work that they've been doing.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. I'm going to share my slides now. Okay. Again, thank you. I am very honored to present the APSA Practice Committee today by sharing our work. We distributed a survey titled Pediatric Surgeons and Retirement, Current Practice and Perspectives to APSA members in late 2025. Our focus was to explore the process of retirement from a practice and individual surgeon perspective, and other important topics such as competence and financial planning that have already been referenced by Dr. Reynolds were specifically outside the scope of this project. The results were many, and I'm only sharing highlights today, the pieces that seem particularly pertinent to this audience. If you attended the APSA meeting in Chicago last month, these slides may look familiar, but we're going into a little more depth today. If you're interested in a robust exploration of the results, of course, you can look for it in a future publication. Our survey population looked like this. We had about 9% of regular, emeritus, and associate APSA members participating. The most common group size was 4 to 7, or what we considered a mid-sized group. 3/4 were employed by or affiliated with a university, and 4 were Canadian. Of those actively practicing, over half were senior surgeons or greater than 15 years since they completed fellowship. 19 respondents were retired, comprising 14% of our study group. The range of age at the time of retirement was 60 to 68 years. Reasons for retirement were mostly, quote, because it was time, followed by a minority who retired for health or family reasons. Interestingly, all but one retired surgeon had a career spanning over 30 years. Of the actively practicing group, only 50% had planned to practice 30 or more years. The majority reported no mandatory retirement age in their organization, and here we begin to highlight the problem with the status quo of retirement. 75% of practicing surgeons report no access to an established transition to retirement pathway, and less than 50% have the flexibility to decrease workload or FTE. However, 63% of retired surgeons did utilize a transition plan by either decreasing call volume, decreasing FTE, or converting to a locums type arrangement, and most of these plans were in an ad hoc fashion. Those who didn't use a transition plan said they didn't want one, and a very small minority think that pathways are not necessary. In line with 3/4 of practicing surgeons not having access to a formalized retirement transition pathway, a similar percent have never been encouraged by their peers or leadership to proactively plan for retirement. Current compensation models largely do not align with the value provided by pediatric surgeons in general, and this creates challenges for senior surgeons who are ready to shift their focus away from clinical activities. Formal succession planning is not universal. Just over half of respondents report that they have participated in it. Members of large groups were more likely to report yes to this question. Mid-sized groups tended to create informal plans, and small groups are least likely to have a plan. This differential between small and large groups will rise again in a moment. Most respondents agree there should not be a specific age where retirement is mandated, and timing instead should depend on cognition, health, stamina, competence, and skills, and be completely individualized to the surgeon, practice type, and needs of the group. The majority do agree that the ideal duration of a retirement off-ramp is 2 to 3 years. The open-ended responses in the survey identified several factors that support the development of a retirement transition pathway. The overwhelming majority believe that senior surgeons are viewed as an asset or at least neutral by their organization. Unified group culture, when present, supports open conversations and collaboration. And the value of senior surgeons does not need to be advertised to this audience. They are not equivalent to a new graduate by any metric. Survey respondents frequently identified senior colleagues as critical sources of mentorship and hard-earned wisdom, particularly for junior partners navigating complex clinical decisions or administrative leadership. This intangible value includes institutional memory, specialized skill sets, and the ability to coach mid-career surgeons into leadership, not to mention hard-earned community, national, or international reputation. Other responses identified factors that counteract successful pathway planning. These include risks to junior and senior partner interests, such as workload and timeline concerns, as well as administrative constraints, including compensation models that undervalue the work that does not directly generate RVUs. The types of value that were just discussed are either not compensated, or inadequately represented in current models. There's also a specific challenge faced by small and mid-sized groups. Large academic or corporate hospital systems may have the redundancy to absorb a partner's transition to part-time work, but solo or underserved small group practices face an acute risk of service collapse. In these smaller cohorts, ineffective or delayed recruitment in conjunction with the retirement of a single partner often forces an all or nothing scenario with no capacity for a gradual transition. And potential culture clashes within the group itself may also contribute to friction when designing an exit strategy. This is a word cloud representation of the free text responses in the retirement survey. In addition to the factors outlined on the previous two slides, call, as you can see, was identified as a huge driver of both concern and importance for surgeons at all levels within the retirement transition discussion. Additionally, the need for structured retirement pathway transitions was also noted. There was an obvious angst among surgeons with different career levels within the survey responses. Junior surgeons are concerned about who will do the work and view senior transitions as a black box, resulting in increased night or weekend work without additional support or compensation, while senior surgeons wonder how they will be valued, fearing loss of professional standing and income if they decrease their RVU production. Absence of a formal policy does have the potential to create a zero-sum game environment where any benefit to a transitioning senior surgeon is perceived as a direct burden to their partners. Despite the relatively small sample size and potential biases of respondents, this survey qualitatively provided meaningful insights into the gaps in retirement practice and opportunities for improvement. So based on our analysis of the survey and discussions with surgeons whose group navigated the retirement transition well, the practice committee offers several recommendations for individual surgeons, division chiefs, and organizational administrators. Key takeaways for individual surgeons include start planning now, which Dr. Reynolds has already mentioned, not as an afterthought, from day one of your career. Communicate early and openly with partners and administration. Make your intentions known. Consider how you will move from doing to being as you near retirement, which may require an identity shift that I know will be addressed in the wellness portion of these webinars. And importantly, support each other. Defining bidirectional value and shared expectations sets everyone up for success. For division chiefs and medical directors, normalize the conversation by, at minimum, including retirement planning in every annual review. Formalize a retirement transition plan for the group. Proactively engage organization administration by incorporating annual review findings into hiring and contract discussions and workforce planning. Encourage the development of alternate compensation models, including flat FTE and part-time options, and amplify the value of senior surgeons. The expertise of a senior pediatric surgeon is a depleting institutional asset if not properly valued. By shifting compensation models toward mentorship, education, and administrative leadership, organizations can ensure a smooth knowledge transfer while protecting the financial stability of the transitioning surgeon and the clinical capacity of junior partners. Retaining senior surgeons is feasible through redesigned roles, not just administrative reassignment. And here we propose core considerations in the creation of a successful transition pathway. There is no one-size-fits-all model due to many local factors, but there must be a framework. Involve all stakeholders in planning. The goals of each group must be recognized and acknowledged. Transparent, fair, clearly defined, and protected compensation models are essential for trust and participation of all parties. Proactive recruitment of successors allows time for thorough transfer of roles and skills. And utilizing alternate FTE models aligns pay with workload. And consider tiered call systems. Conversations around call may be controversial, but it's the elephant in the room, so it must be acknowledged. Decreasing the physical and mental stress of call can significantly increase surgical career longevity, and call flexibility is the highest yield intervention for late career retention, especially as practicing surgeons may be planning to retire 5 to 10 years earlier than their predecessors. Options for balancing call include providing proportional pay. It is more palatable to increase call burden if being compensated to do so. And consider phase-out options as stamina declines, such as dropping weekend call or doing day-only call. These are strategies that have been effective in some groups. This final slide is offered as a tool for use when planning compensation realignment. A flat FTE conversion works well for the distribution of clinical work, where 1.0 FTE equals the mean expected number of calls, clinics, and OR block days per month for the group. This allows for fair shifting of workload between partners and a more straightforward part-time FTE calculation. The remainder of this chart lists ways to compensate highly valued non-patient facing activities, thereby allowing senior surgeons to decrease clinical activity while still playing a vital role supporting the sustainability of the practice and the strength of the overall organization. It is our hope that these conversations and recommendations will help inform a shift in the implementation of retirement across the board in our specialty toward recognition of the value that all pediatric surgeons provide to our patients, partners, hospitals, and our communities. I will now turn it back over to Dr. Reynolds to discuss the financial and healthcare planning implications of retirement, and I do look forward to addressing your questions and comments at the conclusion of this session.
Oh, thank you, Dr. McVeigh. That was really great to get some tangible details of what we can be doing in our practices to help make this transition. And remember to put your questions in the chat. So this is the first part of our checklist, which the QR code will take us to. And I also wanted to mention that in the checklist, there is a third page, and that page is going to be discussed in detail on this second webinar in July, but I just wanted to make sure the whole checklist was put together. I did want to point out again that there is surgeon-specific financial planning advice from a financial advisor in the ACS retirement planning webinar. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't intend to give any financial advice. I'm not an expert in the field, but I am good at organizing. So I thought having a checklist of items that need to be considered would be very helpful for us. I know it's helped me and brought some things to light that I wasn't aware that I needed to consider. And this checklist has been borrowed loosely from the White Coat Investor website. And in that QR code, there's also a link to that resource and the other ones that we've mentioned if you want to read more on your own. So the first item on the checklist is debt. And it's important to be aware of how much money you owe before you retire when you won't have a steady paycheck coming in. Do you still have student loan debt? Do your children have student loan debts? It's a good idea to have these paid off before you retire. What is your consumer debt? Credit card, all your big toys like RVs and boats and airplanes, these should all be paid for before retirement. Mortgages for your home and your investment properties and your second home, again, you should consider having these paid off, as this will free up income. That means you would have to generate less cash when you're retired and you would have more to spend. It's a good idea to take a look at your insurance. What insurance policies have you been carrying that maybe you got through your employer? Do you have term life insurance? This gives you temporary financial protection, and you should consider keeping it in place until you feel financially independent, but at some point you might not need it anymore. And the same goes for disability insurance. Once you're finished working, is that something that you need to continue to have? What are your sources of income? This is the fun part, to see where you are going to get your income from. And again, this list is not meant to be inclusive, just some things to highlight. And I particularly wanted to point out your employer-sponsored benefits. And you may or may not have all of these. These are the ones that I had. And even with financial advice, it was interesting to note I didn't really understand the differences between them or what I needed to do. So the 401A is an employer performance incentive and matching plan. And the issue with this is that you should really consider what time of year you're retiring. Because if you retire in the middle of the year, you may not receive your employer's contribution for the performance incentive part. They may not prorate it. They may only give you that if you retire at the end of the full calendar year. The 403B is a pretty straightforward matched plan. And the 457B plan is also important to understand because this is a deferred compensation plan, meaning you have 90 days from the time you retire to choose what you want to do with the money. You can either take it as a lump sum or you can spread it out over a certain number of years, for example, up to 30 years. And it's your choice, but you have to make it within 90 days. If you don't do anything about it or you weren't aware that it existed, at 90 days, you may potentially get a very large check. And that might cause some difficulties with your income tax for that year. It's a good idea to have a plan for when you're going to take Social Security, what age you decided to do that. And what are the rest of your personal savings? Do you know all the sources? Your IRAs, 401ks, annuities, investments, and passive income such as rental income. So once you've got all that added up, now you need to know what your expenses are going to be. Does your retirement income match your spending plan? And there's some suggestions that even 6 months before you retire, you consider living off of what you've budgeted and planned for those 6 months to see if it matches what your expectations are. I've noticed that my bank account looks different because there isn't a nice sum of money put in every couple of weeks from a paycheck. So I have to be aware of where I'm generating the cash and do I have enough to pay some of the big ticket items or annual expenses that come up. It's pretty straightforward to do a monthly budget, right? That's just our utilities and food, etc. But it's important to also consider the cost of your second home or home maintenance, such as a new roof or if it needs to be painted. You might not have had time to do that during the career. If you want things like a new RV or a boat, maybe your children need continued education expenses. Maybe they're getting married and you have a wedding to pay for. And then also don't forget your annual expenses such as home and car insurance, because that's a big chunk that needs to come out, and your income tax and your quarterly estimated tax payments. You also need a financial plan for health insurance because you may not have been seeing the health insurance premiums as they were coming out of your paycheck, and some of this was covered by your employer. Do you have enough financial resources to do it on your own, at least until you qualify for Medicare at 65? And a reminder that an HSA account is a valuable tool, and we'll talk about that more in the healthcare part. Medicare also, even though premiums may be cheaper, doesn't cover all the out-of-pocket costs. So you need to make a plan to include all of this in your expenses. Estate planning. Do you have a will? Hope so. Or a revocable trust? When was the last time you reviewed your will? Do you need to update it now that you're retired and you're older? Do you have a plan for the potential tax burden of your estate on your heirs when you die? And finally, financial advice. Do you have an advisor? Do you want one? Have you been reading and understanding and gathering information? Have you been asking questions? I think it's kind of like an informed consent. Do I have enough information to make a decision on the advice that someone is giving to me so that I know what to do with my money? I personally don't want to blindly just follow what someone advises me to do. I want to understand so that I can put to good use the money that has been hard earned over the last many years. Okay, let's move on to healthcare. So I found that most relevant retirement healthcare discussions focused on Medicare, and I'm not going to focus on Medicare. There's a lot of information out there. There's free Medicare advisors. The ACS even has a Medicare advisor. So I am going to focus on what to do if you retire before age 65. And I know from talking to people that some people just don't think they can retire before 65 because they are worried about the costs of healthcare. So I think one of the great tools is an HSA account. This isn't for everyone, I know. You can only be eligible for an HSA account if you have a high deductible health plan, and that may not be something that you want. However, you can do an HSA account even for a few years and then switch back to a non-deductible healthcare plan, and you can still keep using the HSA account. The HSA account is what's considered a triple tax advantage, meaning the contributions are either pre-tax or tax deductible. You can invest the money that's in your HSA account and it grows tax-free. And if you withdraw it for appropriate qualified healthcare expenses, you still do not pay tax on it. Another important fact is that it doesn't expire. So you don't have to withdraw for the medical expense for that year. As long as you keep your receipts and your invoices very well documented, you really need to have that. You can wait years before you withdraw the money that's in there and just keep it in there and have it grow investment wise. You can't, of course, pay for healthcare expenses that occurred before you had the HSA account. In terms of contributions, you may have them done monthly because it's part of your paycheck and taken out of your pay. But if you do an annual contribution, it's important to consider putting that in towards the beginning of the year so that the contributions grow tax-free as long as possible. In addition, I found that you can do a one-time rollover from your IRA directly into your HSA account for that year's contribution. And that was pretty straightforward to do. There's a separate tax form to report that, and I didn't have any trouble doing that. So what can the HSA account be used for? It can be used for COBRA premiums, which gives you 18 months of healthcare premiums if you retire before 65. It can't be used, unfortunately, for regular marketplace premiums. It can also be used for Medicare premiums for A, B, C, and D. It cannot be used for Medigap premiums or other Medicare supplements. And it's important to understand those and make sure you know. The other important thing is that once you reach the age of 65, you can withdraw the money for non-healthcare expenses without the extra 20% penalty. So before 65, if you withdraw it for non-healthcare expenses, you pay a 20% penalty plus the income tax rate. After 65, you only pay the income tax rate. So it's kind of like an IRA at that point, and it's been growing all this time. So this is something that you can start on, 10, 20 years before you retire and have a nice sum of money present in there. I think the other fact to know too is that if you're within 6 months of signing up for Medicare, and once you're on Medicare, you can no longer make HSA contributions, but you can still obviously withdraw it to pay for things. Remember to take into consideration your personal circumstances. For example, if your partner or spouse or an adult dependent child has been on your health insurance plan, that you need to make a plan for them as well when you retire. And now, if you retire before the age of 65, then you should be eligible for COBRA and work with your HR or benefits office to make sure that you know how and when to sign up for COBRA. I wasn't given a whole lot of information on this, simply just to call. And it's a little tricky. You have 60 days to enroll from the time you retire, and it's good generally for 18 months of coverage. But there's some little quirks. For example, for me, for my COBRA, I had to pay by check. There was no way to do an auto pay, no automatic bank payment, etc. Until I finally realized that I could pay like 6 months at a time on one check. But it's a kind of a different beast. But I was able to continue the same coverage as the same cost. Once COBRA's finished, your 18 months are up and you are not 65 yet, then you need to go through the marketplace to get further coverage. And this can be done either during the open enrollment period, which every state has, but every state has different dates. So make sure you know what those dates are if you want to do it during that time period. Or you do qualify for a special enrollment period. You need to have a letter stating the date of your termination of COBRA in order to qualify for the second enrollment period. And that was tricky to get. It took me about 5 different phone calls to get to the right person. I know at the beginning they gave me a statement of when it terminated, but I couldn't find it. So if you get that information, make sure you keep it. It will definitely come in handy. If, however, you retire less than 18 months before you're 65, then you will need to transition from COBRA to Medicare. And it's important to note that COBRA here is not considered an active employment coverage, so it doesn't trigger a special enrollment period. And this means it's crucial to sign up for Medicare during your initial enrollment period. And this period is a 7-month period. It's 3 months before your 65th birthday, the month of your 65th birthday, and 3 months after your 65th birthday. You don't want to just wait for your COBRA to end, which might be past this period, because then you would have to wait until an open enrollment period, and then you would incur late penalties for the rest of the time that you're on Medicare. Once you have Medicare and you've confirmed it, then you can cancel your COBRA. And finally, there's Medicare. And like I said, there's a lot of information out there. So I'm not really going to talk about that. I will leave that to everyone to figure out. And that's about it for today. So here's the promised QR code. And thank you all so much for your attention and your time that you gave us today for this presentation. And we'd love to answer any questions that anyone might have. Well, good. I hope that means that it was all just crystal clear. If no one has really any questions, can you put up the QR code again? Jen, can you leave that up longer? Okay, great. Well, thank you again, everyone, for attending. And like Jennifer said, we will put the link in and will be distributed somehow on APSA. And you'll get an evaluation email. And if you miss the link today or the QR code today, you can get the QR code again as well. And then don't forget, there's a couple more webinars coming up that will have even more information.